sent Prime Minister Albanese of Australia a letter in which I gave him warning that the Australian government's policy was promoting and encouraging anti-Semitism in Australia. I wrote, "Your call for a Palestinian state pours fuel on the anti-Semitic fire. It rewards Hamas terrorism. It emboldens those who menace Australian Jews and encourages the Jew hatred now stalking your streets. Anti-Semitism is a cancer. It spreads when leaders stay silent. It retreats when leaders act. I call upon you to replace weakness with action, appeasement with resolve." Instead, Prime Minister, you replaced weakness with weakness, appeasement with more appeasement. Your government did nothing to stop the spread of anti-Semitism in Australia. You did nothing to curb the cancer cells that were growing inside your country. You took no action. You let the disease spread. And the result is the horrific attacks on Jews we saw today. We saw an action of a brave man, turns out a Muslim brave man, and I salute him, that stopped one of these terrorists from killing innocent Jews. But it requires the action of your government, which you're not taking. And you have to, because history will not forgive hesitation and weakness. It will honor action and strength. That's what Israel expects of each of your governments in the West and elsewhere, because the disease spreads and it will consume you as well. But we are worrying right now about our people, our safety, and we.
See then that ye walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time, because the days are evil. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 15 and 16. Shalom. I want to start off by giving all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Rachakodash. Double honors to our venerable apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well, and peace and blessings to the Lord's elect to the house of David. All right, so Brother Aaron coming back at you with another lesson, lowell and be edifying and uplifting unto the elect. And I have an article here. It's actually going back, I think it was 2 days ago or so. And it's regarding this so-called Bondi Beach shooting out in Australia. And typically when these kinds of events happen, when it regards to, mass casualty events, all right, whether it be a so-called bombing or a so-called shooting or some type of like out of the norm type of casualty, it's different when you hear some shit like, oh, in Chicago, you had these gang members that were fighting against each other and then somebody died or whatever. Or you go into the hood and then there was a shooting in Philly or something like that. That is normal, or at least it's been normalized. Okay, but it normally takes place within their own groups, right? Jake on Jake crime and so on and so forth. Like when you hear about these Edomite, atrocities that they be happening and committing, it's mostly Edomite on Edomite crime. You got one guy wakes up and he's like, oh, you know what? I'm just going off my parents, and off myself, weirdo shit like that. But these are kind of the events that you hear that are typical of, human occurrence, right? Especially here in America and many different parts of the world. But you don't really hear about nation against nation, like Islam people versus blacks. You're not really going to hear some shit like that unless it's orchestrated by the TV, media, government, because that's not real life, right? Muslims are not typically, when we go to, let's say we go to a store or anything like that, and you meet Muslims or, people who may practice the Muslim faith, right? For the most part, based on how we operate, right, with wisdom and be very cordial, they don't give us no pushback. As a matter of fact, for the most part, most Muslims that we meet, they're very peaceful, right? They're not, on some crazy, oh, I'm just an Islamist and, I'm an extremist. That picture that's being portrayed by the media is for a reason, okay? It's because this is all part of the fermentation of World War III, right? The events that happened before the actual main event, It's going to be civil wars, civil riots, okay? Nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom. But these are things that are orchestrated behind closed doors. And events like these that we're about to read is part of the fermentation. All right. At some point, you have to quickly realize there are certain patterns that they use to show, right, to the other, so-called informants that this is an inside job, so to speak. Okay. And I see the same pattern every single time. It's always some type of crazy ass attack out of nowhere, which includes guns, right? And then, some way, somehow, the person who's doing it, they normally get shot down. So they don't really have some type of chance to even put them on trial. Okay. And then they have a manifesto. Sometimes they don't have a manifesto, but sometimes they were radicalized online, that kind of thing. And, we have to, and then they come up with these drastic rules and laws to so-called protect and keep people safe. It's always the same pattern. So once you see those things, it's the event happens, and then the narrative that that may come out after the event happens, that's what reveals if it's real, organic, or if it's not. If it's organic, they're not going to really have no new laws or new agenda. This is why we have to do this. But as soon as you see them push the agenda, this is why we've been pushing this, and gun laws, and anti-Semitic speech needs to be better. When you start hearing that kind of rhetoric, you know that it was another incidence of problem, reaction, solution. Okay, they already have a solution. They just need the reaction of the people, but they have to create a problem for that, and that's the problem that we're about to read right now. All right, so the players in this is what makes it so very obvious, right? You got the Israelis, and then you have the Muslims, right? So it's like, okay, very interesting, because like I always say, nobody normally, I say 95% of the time, nobody really bothers the Jays. Like a regular Jay walking around with a yarmulke on his head, walking past you, you're not gonna say anything to him. It's just a regular person to you. You don't look at them as, you guys are the devils of the earth, and you guys are the ones causing all the problems in the world. Nobody looks at them like that. At least I don't, right? Most people don't. If you're in the truth, it's not them doing it, right? It's them behind the scenes, like the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers. We always bring these names up, but then it trickles down. They rule through these corporations and such. So back then, it was just straight up money and power. Now it's more about influence, right? It's whoever has the most influence really has the power, and that's how they rule. Okay, so it says here, Israeli officials heap blame on Australian government after Bondi Beach shooting. Countless warning signs. Okay. So it says here, Israeli officials have sharply criticized the Australian government following a deadly mass shooting at a Hanukkah event on Bondi Beach in Sydney, arguing that Canberra failed to act on numerous warning signs of rising anti-Sem and Islamist extremism. Okay, we haven't heard of Islamist extremism since freaking 2014 with the whole ISIS situation, which ISIS was also created by the U.S. government and the Israeli Mossad, right? Literally, the word ISIS, or the acronym ISIS, goes back to Israeli State something intelligence something, right? Let me see if I can pull it up. What does ISIS stand for? In Israel. There you go. So it's very interesting, right? So listen to this. ISIS is primarily the widely used acronym for a transitional jihadist terrorist organization, the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. That's what they say, right? Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, ISIS, okay? And then you would like to think that the same very people that always want to call themselves victims, they're always being persecuted and they need everyone in the world to stop whatever they're doing and protect them, right? BS. It said they're going to use the same acronym, ISIS, but this is what it means. It says a separate unsubstantiated claim circulating in some conspiracy theories is that ISIS stands for the Israeli Secret Intelligence Service, which it does. Which it does. So how does it become a conspiracy theory? You see, this is why we don't listen to what the fuck these people be saying on the TV no more. Nobody's listening to their bullshit narratives because they just openly just lie. And that's all part of their plans, is to deceive people into taking the MOTB. So if you're expecting the devil to come and tell you the truth, my man, you... Anyway, it says, this is a false narrative used by promoters of anti-Israel disinformation and is not based on facts. Oh, really? Oh, okay. It says Israel's actual intelligence agencies are the Mossad, Shin Bet, and Amman. Right. And they created ISIS. Is that so hard to understand? That I literally have a video that is one guy who's part of that shit explains how they made it work, how they control the U.S. Congress, how they control the fucking media, how they control the policies that runs the military, both domestically and geopolitically. What are you niggas talking about, bro? Conspiracy theory. But these are all facts. See? So yeah, they create these things. They create all these boogeymen, all these monsters, all these would-be terrorists. They create them shits. Okay, because it's to foment a certain outcome, right? And this is all building up, like I said before, building up the stage for what Albert Pike had proposed back to in his letter to Giuseppe Mazzini in regards to how they're going to foment World War III, right? You're going to have the Islamic Muslim world versus the political Zionist state. They're going to be going at it. So this is all how it starts, okay? Two people minding their own business, and then they just come in and say, hey, we're going to use y'all niggas to start some shit. Whether you like it or not, we're just going to create the situations and then use the media to push it and propagate it, all right? And this makes me believe that America is next, all right, this so-called holiday season, because they've already said that apparently the FBI was able to foil some type of attacks, some type of explosions in many different states all at the same time. Like, very interesting, right? Okay. It says, the attack which occurred on Sunday at the Hanukkah by the sea celebration left at least 11 people dead and dozens were wounded. Police say at least 2 gunmen were involved, one of whom was killed by law enforcement, while the other remains hospitalized. Investigators are also examining whether a third person may have participated, and authorities discovered suspected explosive devices in a vehicle near the scene. Very interesting, right? Let's keep reading if this makes sense, right? In the wake of the tragedy, so you'd like to think that, if something like this were to happen that is organic, you might want to think that whoever's going to speak will be talking more towards the victims, right? Oh shit, like, our prayers are with the family, and we're going to do everything in our power to make sure that the families that are affected by this are taken care of, and the people that actually did this harm, we're going to bring them to justice, right? We're going to bring them to bring the law upon them. Like they say, we're going to bring the fullest, how do you say it? To the fullest extent of the law. Yeah, they're going to be punished to the fullest extent of the law. All that bullshit. That's really what normally you would hear, right? It should be more towards the victims that went through this, because it's an unfortunate situation. Like, damn, who could have thought about this? Like, what happened? This is very tragic. People go to a beach on Hanukkah, and then this happens. Like, my goodness. So let's mourn with the victims, right? That would be the normal thing to do, right? So let's read. It says, in the wake of the tragedy, right, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu read from a letter he sent earlier this year to Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, in which he warned that Australia's support for a Palestinian state could embolden extremists and fuel anti-Semitic sentiments. Really now? So how did he know that? And is this something that applies all across the world? Because last time I checked, Jonathan Greenblatt is complaining on radio that, a few years ago, prior to CV, there was a high level of anti-Semitic, rhetoric online. It was like 25% or some shit. 5 years removed, it's now up to like 47%. So there's something needs to be done about this. What fucking mean something needs to be done about this? Huh? People are just noticing things and questioning things. There ain't nothing anti-Semitic about that. You see? But that again, their narratives are failing. All right, their narratives are failing. It's miserable because people see right through the shit. Okay. So it says here, Netanyahu reiterated those earlier concerns, saying Australia's policies had poured fuel on the anti-Semitic fire and accusing Canberra of failing to take decisive action against the spread of Jewish hatred. You see this? I mean, do you even know the motives of the people who did it? Right? So far, based on what we're reading here, it says they gunned people down, right? 11 people are out of here. It's like it. Right? 11 people are out of here. They've been deleted. And this is his shit. This oh, I told you this was gonna happen. You see? You failed to take decisive action against the spread of hate. That's why you've seen this. Oh, really? Yeah, let's read. It says, Netanyahu's remarks included strong language suggesting that anti-Sem worsens when leaders remain silent and emphasized that the Australian government took no action to address what he described as a growing threat. Wow, this nigga here, he seems to be everywhere but nowhere, if you know what I mean. It says the Israeli leader condemned the shooting as a horrific attack targeted specifically at the Jewish community. Really now? Wow. So he went and did the investigation. He went and did the talking to the people that did the shooting. Netanyahu yourself, he went and performed all the investigation there is to perform, and he came up with this verdict that this is a horrific attack targeted specifically at of course, it would be specifically, right? Because normal people just get up and go start shooting the Jewish people, right? That's a normal thing. No, that is a setup created by you niggas to push a certain narrative, because most people don't do that. No, regular people, like I said, 95% of people will not bother them. They're not gonna bother them. Leave them alone. They leave them alone. Okay? Because they're just being used as the propaganda tool to push certain narratives. That's it. All right? This is Jewish hate. This is this. Guess what? Was it last year? Last year, I don't know if it's still going on right now, but last year you had a lot of it's like you had a lot of these broad cap wearing people with a all black wearing, with the telephone pole, telephone wires around the side of their heads. You had them protesting. Okay, they were protesting what their prime minister was doing, whether it be domestic policies or foreign policies. They were protesting that. They were saying, end this war. We don't want this war no more. Leave the people alone. Leave the Palestinians alone. But then is the government listening to that? No. They keep on using the same people, right, as the tools to push more and more propaganda. Oh, look, our people just got shot up. Oh, the Jewish people are not protected enough. Oh, there's anti-Semitic tropes online, and it could lead to attacks later down the line. Oh, these are unusual events that occur because they're orchestrated that way. Okay, that's the point I'm making here with this lesson here, is that do not listen to whatever they push on mainstream media if you're listening by now. Don't listen to that shit. Okay? Sit back and pay attention to the story they're telling you. Okay? Analyze what they're saying. Does it make sense? Like, live in reality. Don't let this bullshit TV, blind you from making actual real judgments and seeing things for what they really are. One better way to go about it is, or a good way to go about it is, everything they say on TV, just assume number one, 100% false. And then you go from there. All right, well, they're saying this happened and that happened. Let me go and find out if this really happened. Then you could get somewhere. See, because now you're going to be scrutinizing the stories that they tell on CNN and MSNBC and Fox, which we know is all false information anyway. When you talk about misinformation and disinformation, the mainstream media are the ones who push that shit a lot. Okay? All they do is lie. Okay? And if you're not watching CNN or MSNBC, you're not losing anything. All right? You're not losing nothing. You're not missing out on anything. So that's for those who be watching TV news and shit. Let's continue. It says, Israeli President Isaac Herzog and Foreign Minister Gideon Saar also issued uncharacteristically blunt statements condemning the Australian government's response to the broader climate of anti-Sem, right? Once again, I don't really hear them, grieving with the actual family. Like, they care so much, but they're not grieving with the family that just lost their people, right? You care so much, but you're not grieving with them. You're just worried about, see, this is how we, this is why we should bring anti-Sem laws. And yeah, okay. It says, Herzog stressed that Israel had repeatedly urged Australian authorities to confront the wave of anti-Sem affecting Australian society. Nigga, how? While Saar described the deadly shooting as the consequence of a two-year anti-Sem rampage on Australian streets. Wow, this is the first time me hearing this. Anti-Sem rampage? 2 years? Interesting. Both officials said the authorities in Canberra had been presented with countless warning signs. Wow, so they knew this was going to happen. They must have known. Yeah. It says that were not acted upon and called on the Australian government to recognize and respond to the danger posed by rising hate and extremist rhetoric. Where's the proof? Give us some examples of these rising hate and extremist rhetoric. Give us some examples of that. And questioning your bullshit is not part of that. So give us real stuff that we should really ponder on. You know what I'm saying? Let it live rent free in our heads so we could think about it. How about that? Bullshit. Australian Prime Minister Albanese has condemned the attack and affirmed that the targeting of Jewish Australians was a reprehensible act. He expressed sorrow over the loss of life. Oh, finally, somebody did. And pledged cooperation in efforts to prevent such acts of violence. Ooh, so what's that going to be? Right? What kind of new laws and regulations are we going to finally start seeing in Australia to keep the anti-Semitic terrorism down? Or get rid of it all completely? How? What are we going to do? Right? It says, Australian officials have framed the mass shooting as an abhorrent act of anti-Sem terrorism and are continuing investigations into the motivations and affiliations of the suspects. And it's very interesting because they're pushing hard on the concept of anti-Sem, but the reality is both the people from who practice the Islamic faith, right, that are being used to foment this plan, and the so-called Jewish people, all right, Edomites, right? You have Elam, you have Ishmael, you have Esau. These three are all Shemitic, right? According to when you go back to the scriptures in the book of Genesis, they all descend from Shem. Okay, Elam descends from Shem. You have what's the other one? Ishmael, who is a son of Abraham. He's a descendant of Shem. Abraham is a descendant of Shem. And then later down the line, you have Esau, the Edomites, that descends from Isaac. You have Jacob and Esau that came from Isaac. They're also Shemites. So those three different people we just mentioned, Edomites, Elamites, and Ishmaelites, they're all Shemites. Okay, they're all Shemites. So they'll fit the very definition of being Semitic, going based on the verbiage that they use, the word that they use, which is not a real word. It was made up. The concept of Semitic is a made up word. Okay, and it only focuses on the Zionists. That's their word that they created in order to demonize anybody who come against or question their given narratives that they push out there. That's it. Okay, it's to discredit anybody who raise any questions or notice anything that is out of the ordinary, or bring certain things, scrutinize the Jays, so to speak. And when I say Jays, like I said before, I'm not talking about the people, the regular Jays you see walking around in Brooklyn. I'm talking about the people that actually make shit move, make things happen. Right? The ones who are behind your governments and behind your politicians and making your life a living hell in the name of protecting them, sending billions of dollars across over into Israel. And then you sit out here, your president is telling you, oh, well, we're going to be sending you a $2,000 check. And then they turn around and say, oh, well, we don't know how that's going to cost and how much money that's going to be. And it could be billions of dollars and we're not sure how that's going to play out. And they're stringing you along. They're stringing you along until you get to the UBI. That's where this all leads to. Once the government starts giving you stimulus checks and giving you bread and sending you money, pay attention, because that's the beginning of them setting you up, sweetening you up, and buttering you up for that UBI, right? Life is hard as it is, and 2026 is going to be much worse, much, much worse, okay? You're going to see new laws, new regulations, new things that are being pushed by AI, okay? And remember what Klaus Schwab said, right? He said, get this is all tying in, all right? These are the last days, so pay attention to everything that's all, because remember, they're all interconnected, right? A mass shooting in Australia could be reverberated over here in America, right? Come Christmas time, another shit fucking event could happen here. And then, oh, see, Australia happened a couple of weeks ago, and then now New York City and this city and that city and that. Just pay attention. That's all I'm gonna say. Okay. But again, like Klaus Schwab said, he said that the fourth industrial revolution, all right, is happening very fast. It's gonna be upon us like a tsunami. So again, remember their agenda is to foment World War III, but before they do that, they're gonna create that chaos, and then the Christians are gonna be pulled into this shit. So don't get it twisted. Just because it's Amalek versus Ishmael and Elam and them, that's not the end of it. It's predominantly Ishmael, but that's not the end of it. Okay, they're gonna do it to bring in is like a vortex. They're gonna bring in you so-called Christians. All right, you are the main target. They want to eliminate your concept of religion altogether. Okay, because Noah Harari doesn't believe in your God, and if Noah Harari is gonna be the one who's running shit, then he has to do away with your concept of God. Okay, because remember, he said it's your God, not my God, right? Everyone has their own God, So those are all man-made things. Like we don't really need to do it. We don't need to really have this whole concept of just a God. Nah, ain't no such thing. Because the Buddhists who say his God, and then he would talk to the Islam man and say, oh no, that's your God. Your God is Allah. My God is whoever. You see? So that's the kind of argument that he's making. That all these gods were made up by men. Anyway, it's all man-made. So science is going to do away with all that. Science is the real God, the true God, because that is not based on religion. It's based on scientific data. It's just bullshit. It's all this data worshiping bullshit. It's disgusting. But leave it to an Edomite and a sodomite Edomite, and this is what you're going to get. All right? This is what you're going to get. Okay? But yeah, as the Apostle Paul said, okay, we have to be circumspect, right? Walking circumspectly, right? Not as fools, but as wise, right? Because we're redeeming the times, because the times are evil. The days are evil. Okay, the days are evil. Don't act unwise. Don't put yourself in a situation that is going to cause any type of harm. Just protect yourself. Study, pay attention, see what's going on. And use righteous judgment. Like use your brain. Pray for the Lord to guide you. And have faith that when he's guiding you, you're actually making the right decision. Because sometimes you might hear a voice in your head and you might push it back or be like, oh, no, that's just me. Nah, that's the Spirit talking to you, bro. Stay quiet for about 15, 20 seconds and listen to what the Spirit is saying, and you're going to get your answer. All right? So that's just something I want to share real quick. All right? That we're in those times, man. All right? At any point in time, this is what's going to happen. Let me see if I can get that real quick. All right, there's a book of 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 and verse 3 says, for when they shall say peace and safety, right? And that's pretty much what you're seeing. There's going to be a lot of gatherings and, celebrations and all this different shit. It's like 2025 was a horrible year. I'm not sure what people will be celebrating, but leave it to them. It's a custom, right? It's not really we're celebrating because something good happened. It's just a custom. Whether good things are happening or bad things are happening, these people find reasons to celebrate. All right, it goes back to ancient Babylonian customs anyway. So it's all tied into rituals. All right, it's a ritualistic thing. It says, for when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. So one thing I'll say about that is prepare, because in 2026, these so-called events that are going to be happening, these problems that are going to be happening, they will not be solved. There will be one problem that leads to another as leverage for them to push for another solution. Ultimately, the one solution. So in essence, 2026 could be the year of what? Many problems to one solution. That's it. Okay? Multiple problems. You got poly crisis. All these crises that are going to happen is all going to result in one solution to fix all of it. And we already know what that is. Okay? But the steps for them to get there is what we're seeing unraveling step by step all around the world. Okay? So be prepared. All right? They said that they have millions of them kind of people, them extremist niggas. They got millions of them roaming around the streets of New York and different states and so on and so forth. Okay? And they have bad intentions. Ooh, bad intentions. All right, so yeah. You notice they haven't done anything yet, right? Those so-called military age men that crossed the border over a year ago, they all in here. I don't know what the fuck they doing, right? Do they have jobs? Are they living in hotels? Are they still doing the squatter rights shit? Are they still in Colorado taking over apartment complexes? You don't hear these stories no more. You notice that, right? But what we need to hear more is what's up with them niggas? What they up to, right? What kind of plans are they making? What plans are they having? Or they're just gonna all just, coincidentally just wait for the one moment, one perfect time, and then in lockstep with the government, they're gonna do some shit, and then the government is gonna be right there at that right time to say, "Oh, we saved the day. This is why we need to come up with these new laws," and so on and so forth. Gideon technology and Palantir technology, which is made to kill people, and yes. Okay, so hopefully that made sense. Kind of rambled a little bit there, but hopefully you were edified and informed. This is what's going on. All right, so we had to see what plays out after this. All right, but I'm gonna leave it off there. Lowell, you're edified and informed. In closing, I'd like to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rachak Kodash, the Wadi Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai. Until next time, Shalom.